12-year-old girl's letter shocks the president. His response stuns the nation in a place tucked away on the map, along a harsh and unforgiving border. There was a small town that had lost everything, law, hope, and even its future. Yet in that very town, a letter from a 12-year-old girl, addressed to the president, shook an entire nation. Can a small act spark hope and change the fate of hundreds of lives? This is the story of Sophia, a girl who poured all her hope into a single piece of paper, igniting light in a world that seemed consumed by darkness. There are places that don't appear on the map, yet the most heartbreaking stories unfold there. This small town on the southern border was once a peaceful home to hundreds of families, but now it's a shadow of its former self. Empty streets, closed doors, and fear lurking in every corner. Sophia, just 12 years old, grew up amid this decay. Her father, a truck driver known for his integrity, was once a figure of respect in the town, but his integrity came at a devastating cost. One day my father refused to transport a shipment for the criminals. They killed him right there on the street in front of our house. My mother told me not to look outside, not to cry. Silence is the only way to survive, she said, but I don't want to live like that anymore. Since her father's death, Sophia and her mother had lived in constant fear and caution. The town was under the tight control of a ruthless gang. People existed, but they didn't truly live those who tried to leave, or threatened those who dared to resist, or punished. But Sophia couldn't bear it anymore. One quiet evening, under the dim glow of a kerosene lamp, she sat down, opened a sheet of paper, and began to write. Dear Mr. President, if you're reading this letter, please come, help us. This town is no longer a home. The adults are terrified, and we, the children, have no future. I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, but if no one does anything, nothing will ever change. Sophia carefully folded the letter and tucked it into her jacket pocket. The next morning she made her way to the bus stop to find the only person she trusted to deliver the letter, the last bus driver who still passed through the town. The driver looked at me, his eyes filled with concern and hesitation. He asked, "Are you sure sending this letter is like gambling with your life?" I nodded and said, "I don't have any other choice." The bus rumbled out of town, carrying Sophia's letter and her fragile thread of hope. With it a small letter written from the heart of a young girl. Could it possibly change the fate of an entire town consumed by darkness? The bus rolled along dusty roads, carrying a secret into which Sophia had poured all her trust. Her letter passed through many hands, from the bus driver to a small-town postal worker, until it finally reached a seasoned journalist. He had spent his life bringing forgotten stories into the light. When he opened the letter, the shaky handwriting revealed itself. Line by line, his callous hands paused as they began to tremble. A child wrote these words. He said quietly to a colleague, "We adults have stayed silent for far too long, but this little girl refuses to accept that the letter was more than a cry for help. It was an indictment of indifference." The journalist immediately penned a detailed exposé, uncovering the horrifying reality of life in the town. Along with Sophia's letter, he sent the article to an old friend, a senior national security advisor at the White House. One quiet morning, Sophia's letter was placed on the president's desk, accompanied by the journalist's report. As he read the simple, heartfelt words, the room fell silent. "Mr. President, if you're reading this letter, please come. Our town is dying in darkness." The president set the letter down, his eyes as heavy with thought as he turned to the advisors waiting nearby. "How could this happen in our country?" he asked, his voice low and steady. One advisor spoke up cautiously. "Sir, this area is extremely complicated. The local government is practically powerless and the gangs operate with impunity. Intervening here would be highly risky." The president straightened in his chair, his eyes sharp with resolve. The greatest risk is doing nothing. If a child is brave enough to ask for help, then we must be brave enough to act. I want to plan immediately. Less than 48 hours later, federal agencies began to mobilize. A covert investigation team was deployed to the town, blending in as locals to gather intelligence on smuggling routes, hidden warehouses, and corrupt officials, aiding the operation too. A special task force began preparing for a decisive raid, targeting the gang's headquarters. A reconstruction unit from the Department of Urban Development drafted plans for emergency relief, including repairing infrastructure and providing essential supplies to the residents. However, as the covert team infiltrated the town, they quickly realized the situation was far more complex. The town wasn't just under the control of one gang, it was a key hub in a vast transnational criminal network. Bolstered by the complicity of certain local officials, the report sent back to the president included a dire warning. Sir, this isn't just a town under siege. It's a critical transit point failure. Here could have serious repercussions. The president responded with unwavering resolve. We're not just fighting gangs. We're fighting to restore faith. And I won't let Sophia or any child wait a moment longer. Meanwhile, in the town, Sophia remained unaware of the unfolding plans. All she knew was that her mother seemed more anxious than ever. One night, as Sophia peered out the window, she noticed unfamiliar figures lingering in the shadows of the streets. Something was changing, though she couldn't yet tell if it was for better or worse. But is this change a glimmer of light or just another storm rolling in while the town remains shrouded in fear? The covert investigation teams worked silently. They moved through narrow alleys, blending in as ordinary townsfolk, and meticulously documented every aspect of the gang's operations, smuggling routes, hidden warehouses, and even the corrupt local officials aiding the criminals were slowly exposed. However, the subtle changes didn't escape the notice of Ramon, the gang leader. He sensed something was wrong. The once timid townspeople now dared to meet his gaze, and it set his instincts on edge. They're up to something, he growled, his sharp eyes scanning his gathered henchmen. If we don't strike first, everything we've built will fall apart. The roar of truck engines echoed through the empty streets as Ramon issued the chilling command. He ordered the abduction of several townsfolk to send a brutal message. Anyone aiding outsiders would pay the ultimate price in the dead of night. Sophia was startled awake by a commotion. She rushed to the window, her heart pounding, and froze in terror as she saw her mother being dragged into the back of a truck. Mom, Sophia screamed, but the darkness swallowed her voice. The house felt unbearably empty. Her mother's sweater draped over a chair, a haunting reminder of her helplessness. But Sophia didn't cry. She took a deep breath, clutching the sweater tightly in her small hands, and stood tall. I can't wait. My mom needs to be saved. This town needs to be saved. Sophia made her way to the temporary base of the investigation team, where brave residents had begun cooperating with the authorities. She walked straight up to the commanding officer, her eyes blazing with determination. I know where my mom is. I can help, she said firmly. The officer paused for a moment, taken aback. Standing before him wasn't just a child. It was a young warrior, fueled by courage and resolve. He gave a small nod. We'll save them, but you have to promise to follow our instructions. Exactly. Sophia nodded without hesitation. Under the quiet cover of night, unmarked vehicles rolled into the town, their headlights cutting through the gloom. The special task force was ready for a decisive mission, not only to rescue the hostages, but to dismantle Ramon's entire criminal network inside his stronghold. Ramon raised a glass of wine, surrounded by his henchmen, utterly confident that no one would dare challenge him. He remained oblivious to the fact that the task force had surrounded every possible escape route. The main door was blown open. Figures dressed in black stormed in, Like a whirlwind, Raman roared, "Get them! No one escapes! Gunfire!" Erupted the sharp cracks, echoing through the halls as beams of light from flashlights sliced through the darkness. The special operatives moved swiftly, securing room after room, but Raman, ever cunning, slipped away into a hidden passage. He made his way toward an underground tunnel, his last-ditch attempt to flee. However, Sophia, guided by memories of her father's deliveries along the town's hidden paths, had helped the operatives block the final exit freeze. "Drop your weapon," an operative shouted. Ran smirked and raised his gun, defiance etched on his face. But before he could fire, a single precise shot struck him, sending him to the ground game, over the operative said, as he clamped cuffs onto Ramon's wrists. When Sophia's mother and the other captives were LED out of the stronghold, their hands trembled with residual fear, but as they stepped into the light, the tears streaming down their faces no longer carried pain. They carried relief from a distance. Sophia's mother spotted her daughter, her eyes filled with love and pride, as she broke into a run, throwing her arms around Sophia. "You did it," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You brought the light back to all of us." Sophia smiled but said nothing in her heart. She knew this wasn't just her victory. It belonged to everyone. As dawn broke, Ron and his remaining henchmen were escorted out of the town in heavy silence. Trucks carrying essential supplies, construction materials, and teams of experts rolled in, signaling a new beginning for the long-suffering community. For the first time in years, the sunrise brought a strange, almost unfamiliar feeling to the town. The gunfire had ceased, and the shadows of fear began to lift, yet the air was heavy with quiet uncertainty. Residents cautiously stepped out of their homes, their eyes wary, as though fearing this newfound peace might be nothing more than a fleeting dream. Sophia stood in the middle of the town square, her small hand gripping her mother's tightly around them. Federal workers began distributing clean water, food, and medical supplies. Despite the relief efforts, an uneasy stillness lingered in the air. One federal agent climbed the steps of the town's oldest and most dilapidated building, raising his hand to command attention. His voice rang out with conviction. "We didn't just come here to rescue you. We came to help you rebuild your lives, but this will only work if every single one of you joins in together. We can make the town hall again from the crowd." An older man stepped forward, his voice trembling but full of emotion. "I've lived in fear for so many years. I used to think that if I stayed silent, they would leave us alone. But today I realize silence is never the answer. I don't know where to start, but if we stand together, we can make this work." A hesitant ripple of applause began growing louder and more confident with each clap. The young woman reached out and took Sophia's hand, her voice steady and warm. "You did what we couldn't bring ourselves to do. Now it's our turn." That very day, the townspeople began clearing away the debris of their shattered lives. Walls scarred with years of neglect were transformed into canvases for hope. Sophia and a group of children painted images of doves, rising suns, and words of encouragement across the crumbling facades at a community meeting. The first of its kind. In years, people spoke openly about their dreams and needs. A man who had once run a small store stood and said, "I want to reopen my shop, but I'm going to need help to make it happen." Another voice chimed in, "If you need paint, I can help. We can rebuild everything." Brick by brick, door by door, Sophia sat beside her mother, listening to the conversations unfold for the first time. She felt hope quietly making its way back into the hearts of the townspeople as the residents came together to restore their town. Federal reconstruction teams worked diligently alongside them. Roads were repaired, schools were rebuilt, and the hospital began to take shape again. One afternoon, a worker from the Department of Urban Development noticed Sophia painting a wall. He crouched beside her and asked, "What are you painting?" Sophia pointed to a bright sunrise stretching across a blue sky. "I'm painting our future, a day when we don't have to be afraid anymore." The man nodded a soft smile. Crossing his face, "You're absolutely right. But to make that happen, we all need each other, don't we?" Sophia grinned. "I think I can't do it alone. But if everyone works together, everything can change within weeks." The town began to transform. Shops reopened, schools prepared to welcome students once more, and children laughed and played along streets that had been repaired, and renewed the community center. Once a crumbling building was repaired and transformed into a gathering place for events and sea celebrations above its main entrance. The townspeople erected a sign with bold, hopeful letters. "Together we rise." Sophia stood beside her mother, gazing at the sign. An elderly woman approached gently, taking Sophia's hand. "We used to think we were powerless," the woman said softly, "but you reminded us that even in the darkest of times, we can still find the light." Sophia's mother knelt down and embraced her tightly. "You've done more than I ever dared to dream, Sophia. You didn't just save me. He saved this whole town." Sophia smiled, her voice steady but humble. "We did it, Mom, all of us together as the golden light of the setting sun bathed the town." Sophia sat by the mural of the sunrise she had painted. Her eyes drifted toward the horizon, filled with dreams of a future where the town would no longer be a forgotten shadow, but a place full of laughter and life. Part 4 ends with the townspeople joining hands in the glowing light of the sunset, a powerful symbol of their rebirth and reclaimed hope. Months later, the small town that had once been shrouded in darkness now looked entirely different. Streets that had been eerily silent were now filled with laughter and conversation. Doors that had long remained shut were flung open, welcoming new life into the community in the town square. A special ceremony brought everyone together. The people gathered, their eyes bright with renewed hope, before the newly restored building, now the Sophia Community Center. A helicopter landed carrying a visitor. No one expected. The president stepped out amidst whispers of awe. There was no grand entourage, no elaborate speeches. He stood humbly in the circle of those who once thought they would be forgotten, and spoke the story of this town as a reminder to us all. A small act, a flicker of light, when nurtured, can illuminate an entire community. Today I don't just see a town reborn. I see a future where we all believe that nothing is impossible. He turned to Sophia, who stood beside her mother, her eyes shining with quiet. "Cried Sophia," he said warmly, "you've taught us a lesson we must never forget. A courageous heart can change the world that day." The townspeople laid the first bricks for a new school, a new hospital, and several other rebuilding projects. It wasn't just about physical restoration. It was about reclaiming the trust and hope that had been lost for so long. Sophia, though just a young girl, became a symbol of transformation. Her letter was framed and hummed proudly in the community center as a constant reminder that great change often begins with small actions on what was once the town's most desolate wall. A bold phrase was painted: "We have found the light again." Sophia's story is fictional, but the lessons it carries are profoundly real in life. We may sometimes feel too small to make a difference, but like Sophia, with a single act and a spark of belief, you can start to change the world around you. We hope this story has touched your heart and reminded you that no one is ever too small to create something extraordinary. If you found this story meaningful, please help us spread its message by liking this video to support inspiring content, sharing this story so it can reach more people, leaving a comment with your thoughts, or sharing a story that has inspired you and subscribing to our channel to stay connected with more meaning. F stories in the future. Sophia and her friends ran and played along the newly paved streets, their laughter echoing through the air. The American flag fluttered in the golden sunlight, a powerful symbol of a new beginning, a place where hope and trust could thrive. Once more together, we can make this world a better place.